Dear watcher, dear subscriber, dear teachers, my dear respected students and followers and fans. Today the topic is summary of Pride and Prejudice. So let's do it. Let's get started. The Bennets are summary of Pride and Prejudice. The Bennets are a resident of a village called Longbourn, situated in Hertfordshire. Their village is located a mile away from the small town of Meryton, which is a uh, cantonment and constantly visited by different regiments of military. The Bennets have been married for 23 years and have five daughters, including Jane, Elizabeth, Mary, Catherine and Lydia. Number one, Jane. Number two, Elizabeth. Number three, Mary. Number four, Catherine. And number five, Lydia. The Bennet sisters are all marriageable, and their mother is desperate to get them married and well settled. Due to the absence of a male heir, Mr. Bennet's estate is entitled to be inherited by a distant cousin. The Bennet sister frequently visit their aunts, Mrs. Philip, who lives in Meryton, and often invites military officers to her house. Among their pardon me, among their various neighbors, neighbors, the family of Sir William Lucas is quite close to Bennet's, and Elizabeth Bennet and Charlotte Lucas are close friends. The novel opens with the excitement caused at Longbourn and its surroundings due to the arrival of Charles Bingley, a young man who hires Netherfield Park. Mrs. Bennet compels her husband to visit the new tenant at Netherfield and initiate a relation with him because she hopes one of her daughters can get married to this rich bachelor. Besides Mrs. Bennet, all families in the neighborhood look forward to some intricacies with Bingley, whom they consider a young man with large fortune. The balls and parties held regularly provide opportunities to the young people to meet each other and consequently find suitable match for them. In the first ball at Meryton, Bingley introduced the neighbors to his friend, Mr. Fitzwilliam Darcy, who immediately receives attention because of his fine, tall person, handsome features, nobleman, and the report of his having 10,000 a year. Darcy is the owner of Pemberley, an estate located in Derbyshire, and he is unfamiliar with the people at the ball. At Meryton Assembly, Darcy remains very reserved, but he often but he offends the other guests by one of his remarks about Elizabeth Bennet, which she overhears and reports to others. When Bingley suggested that Darcy should dance with Elizabeth Bennet, whom he think is very pretty and very agreeable, Darcy replies she is tolerable but not handsome enough to tempt me. The remark makes Elizabeth develop a prejudice against Darcy and brings an end to any cordial feelings towards him. Elizabeth's friend Charlotte Lucas is of the view that Darcy's social status give him a right to be proud, and Elizabeth responds by saying that she could easily forgive his pride if he had not mortified hers. Thus forms a rift between Darcy and Elizabeth, which gets deeper and wider in the coming days. They meet several times and often talks on different topics. By Elizabeth continues to dislike him. On the contrary, Darcy starts taking interest in Elizabeth and admire her intelligence and beauty, in spite of the fact that he finds her family's behavior extremely abominable abominable. Family's behavior extremely abominable. Caroline Bingley dislikes Elizabeth and is often uncivil to her in Darcy's presence. The Bingley sisters, however, tolerate Jane Bennet, who becomes the focus of their brother's interest, but they believe there is no chance of his getting married to her. The Bennets receives a guest, William Collins, who is a clergyman and the likely heir of their father's property after his death. Collins visit Collins visit the Bennets looking for a suitable wife and expresses his interest in proposing Jane. However, Mrs. Bennet informs him that Jane is being courted by Bingley and is likely to get engaged soon, and Mrs. Collins had only to chance from Jane to Elizabeth. In extremely comic manners, he proposes Elizabeth and she declines his offer, thus making her mother extremely furious, but her father really pleased with her decision. Colin soon turns his attentions to Charlotte Lucas, and she willingly accept his offer. Elizabeth is horrified at her friend's decision to marry Collins, but Charlotte reminds her that she is already 27 and with her plain looks and no dowry, she has no choice but to accept Colin's proposal. The Charlotte, who is not romantic and only desires for a comfortable home, gets married to Collins and leaves for Hunsford parsonage in Kent. In the meanwhile, Elizabeth gets acquainted with an officer, George Wickham, in Meryton, and observes that when he meets Darcy, neither talk to the other. In fact, she notices that on seeing Wickham, Darcy's face get red, while that of Wickham becomes white, and she realizes that the two men know each other well. Since she has developed prejudice against Darcy, she avails every opportunity to meet Wickham and get some information about Darcy. Wickham's poisons poisons her mind by telling her that he is the son of the steward of Pemberley, and Darcy's deceased father promised him £1,000 for his education and training as a clergyman. Darcy, however, after the death of his father, denied Wickham his share of inheritance, and this compelled him to join military. He also tells her that Darcy is the nephew of Lady Catherine de Bourgh, both you can say, the patroness of Collins and honors of Rosing Park, and she intends to get him married to his only daughter Elizabeth. Thus forms a very poor opinion of Darcy and considers pride his greatest fault. The Bingley suddenly leave Netherfield Park in autumn, and Caroline Bingley informs Jane that they play to stay in London during winter. Jane visits her maternal uncle, Mr. Gardiner, who is a trader and settled with his wife and children in London. And during her stay with them, pays a visit to Caroline Bingley. She is disappointed at the cold attitude of Bingley's sisters, who shows no interest in maintaining friendship with her or returning to Netherfield Park. Thus, Jane's prospects of getting married to Bingley get bleak, and Elizabeth is also affected by her sister's disappointment. In March, Elizabeth visits her friend Charlotte at her new home in Hunsford Parsonage and meets Darcy and his cousin Colonel in British English and Colonel in Pakistani English, Fitzwilliam or Asian English or subcontinental English. Fitzwilliam and Rosings Park. Colonel Fitzwilliam tells Elizabeth that Darcy is quite pleased that he saved a friend from the inconvenience of a most inconvenient marriage. Elizabeth realizes that Colonel Fitzwilliam is referring to her family and gets angry at Darcy for that. Colonel Fitzwilliam is referring to her family and get angry at Darcy's for throwing a spanner in the way of Jane's marriage with Bingley. She also observes Lady Catherine's abominable manners and her unbearably assertive attitude. Thus, her prejudice against Darcy gets stronger at the moment when Elizabeth is extremely angry and hates Darcy. He visits her and proposes her, declaring his love for her. She indignantly refuses to accept his offer and blames him for his excessive pride, besides spoiling Jane's prospects of marriage and Wickham's professional plans. Darcy gets furious on hearing her allegations but does not reply immediately. Next day, he visited Elizabeth and gives her a letter containing his answers to her allegations against him. The letter reveals to Elizabeth that Wickham not only received the £1,000 he was promised by late Mrs. Darcy, but also another sum of £3,000. But he squandered his fortune. However, his biggest crime was his attempt to seduce Darcy's 16 years old sister Georgiana, whom he convinced to elope with him last year. Georgiana, however, wisely told her brother about the wicked intentions of Wickham and saved herself and her family from disgrace. Elizabeth is horrified when she realizes how Wickham misled her, and she foolishly believed in whatever information he fed her. Darcy in her letters, and she foolishly believed in whatever information he fed her. Darcy in her letter also tells her that he found total want of property in the behavior of her Bennet family, and Jane's indifference to the partiality of Bingley made him think that she does not love him. In fact, Charlotte also pointed out the same fact, that Jane's inability to express her emotions discourages her suitors. Thus, Elizabeth began to change her opinion of Darcy. On her return to Longbourn, Elizabeth finds that her sister Lydia plans to go to Brighton, accompanying the young wife of Colonel Forster. Elizabeth advises her father to stop Lydia, but he dismisses her suggestions and Lydia leaves for Brighton. Elizabeth also gets an invitation from her aunt and uncle, the Gardners, to accompany them on a tour of north of England. She accepts the offer and joins them. They travel to different places and finally reach Derbyshire, where Darcy's estate Pemberley is located. After confirming that Darcy is away on some businesses, Elizabeth visits Pemberley and is cordially received by the housekeeper, Mrs. Reynolds. She happily shows Elizabeth that whole estate and praises her master for his many qualities. Mrs. Reynolds strongly believe that Darcy is not proud. He only does not rattle away like other young men. To Elizabeth's surprise, Darcy unexpectedly arrives and welcomes her with no hint of the bitterness between them. The gardeners are impressed by his hospitality and praise him. Mr. Gardiner declares that he is perfectly well behaved, polite, and unassuming. Darcy make Elizabeth meet his younger sister, and she finds Georgiana exceedingly shy. She also meets the Bingley at Pemberley and is surprised to hear Charles Bingley referring to his not seeing Jane for 8 months. The Bingley sisters, however, treat Elizabeth in very insulting manners, especially in the presence of Darcy. While staying at Derbyshire, Elizabeth receives a letter from Jane informing her about Lydia's elopement with Wickham. Extremely distressed and upset, Elizabeth share this bad news with Darcy, who consoles her and promises to help her family. Elizabeth and gardeners immediately return to Longbourn and unsuccessfully search for Lydia. Even Colonel Foster is unable to locate the eloped couple. However, after some time, they are located and advised to get married in a respectable manner and then leave for a distant location where Wickham has been appointed. When Lydia returns to Longbourn in order to get married, she mentioned her meeting Darcy, and Elizabeth suspect that he has played a major role in finding the couple and settling all their financial affairs. She writes to Mrs. Gardner and inquires about Darcy's involvement in Lydia's matter. She soon receives a reply that Darcy not only located the abode of Lydia and Wickham, but also convinced them to get married. Besides, he also paid all the debts Wickham accumulated and paid for his appointment in a certain militia. He, however, convinced Mrs. Gardner to keep his role a secret from the Bennets and take the credit for resolving the matter. These revelations made by Mrs. Gardner about Darcy conduct creates a powerful effect on Elizabeth, and her heart did whispers that he had done it for her. She realized that Darcy loves her and she changed her opinion about him. Lydia's marriage is followed by Jane and Bingley's engagement, and then Elizabeth receives a surprise visit from Lady Catherine, who strives to dissuade Elizabeth from accepting a proposal of marriage from Darcy. She insists that Darcy has to marry her daughter and not a woman far below his social station. Elizabeth tells Lady Catherine that if her nephew is a gentleman, she is also a gentleman's daughter, and they are both equal. So she should not object to this match. Lady Catherine leaves angrily, and Elizabeth soon receive a proposal of marriage from Darcy, which she happily accepts, and the novel ends with Jane and Bingley and Elizabeth and Darcy's marriages. The plot of Pride and Prejudice. Jane Austen is known for her tightly That is our next topic, and but I want to give you some important lines. In this case, I will give you this complete lecture in a separate portion. Jane Austen is known for her tightly knitted plots with no loose ends. Pride and Prejudice beings witness to this quality, since its plot is quite well viewed and one event leads to the other. The action of the novel begins with the arrival of Bingleys in Hertfordshire, which leads to meeting between Jane Bennet and Charles Bingley, and also Elizabeth Bennet and Fitzwilliam Darcy. While Jane and Bingley get closer, Elizabeth overhears a remark about her farm Darcy and begins to dislike him. Her aversion for Darcy increases because she is fed incorrect information about him from a military officer, Wickham, who is an old acquaintance of Darcy. The plot develops further with the arrival of Collins, a relative of Bennet's, and heir to their property, owing to the fact that Mrs. Bennet has no male issue. Collins comes to Hertfordshire with the intention of finding a match for him and hopes to propose Jane, the eldest daughter of Mrs. Bennet. He is, however, informed about Jane's likelihood of getting married to Bingley, so he proposes to Elizabeth, who declines his offer. But Collins successfully convinces Elizabeth's friend Charlotte Lucas to marry him. Collins and Charlotte get married, and the later invites her friend Elizabeth to visit her at Hansford Parsonage, where her husband is a clergyman. On visiting Hansford, Elizabeth gets acquainted with Darcy's aunt, Lady Catherine, the owner of the estate called Rosing Park at Hansford. She also meets Darcy and his cousin, Colonel Fitzwilliam, who have come to visit their aunt. So you can why I read all these lines, because these particular lines give you the complete knittingness and complete knitted plot and the evidence of Jane Austen's complete knitted plot. So I read all these lines. So we will discuss it later in another lecture, inshallah. So let me know before going. I would like to request you that must subscribe and hit the bell icon. This channel is not only for the BS English students, but also for the teachers, private teachers especially. They are working in some private institutions to help them, to educate them more, to increase their teaching pedagogy, to increase their teaching methodology, and to increase their teaching techniques and teaching intricacies. So thank you very much. Best regards, and say with me, do something more for humanity, do something more for knowledge and practices. Have a good day.